Fitness will be who you are, not what you do. I like that, Mark. That's a good statement for everybody to consider here this morning as they're getting their day started with Mornings and Alive with Keith and Friends here, the only morning show to help you guys get your day started. I invite you to like the channel, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. We are just building this airplane and we're making it into a rocket ship. And hey, good morning, Shinku Shinku, good to see you here this morning. Good to see you, Shelly Spence. And today, and good to see you here, of course, Enzo. Yeah, we're going to talk, we got Jory Jansen coming up here in about 12 minutes, and we're going to get into eating and so forth, Jory and protein and so forth as she joins the show here in about 12 minutes or so. But we're going to keep breaking down Eddie Hall. Johnny, the study mentions that Eddie's tendons, particularly the ones connected to his quadriceps, were only about 30% larger compared to an average person, despite the massive size of his muscles. With such disproportionate growth between tendons and muscles, Johnny, how do athletes like Eddie, and even yourself, manage injury risk when pushing the body to its limits? And I think about your back and how we're taught to lift heavy things. How do you teach yourself in this situation? And how does Eddie teach himself not to be injured? John.
That's a good question, because when it comes down to it, in a sport like that, it's extreme. And
yes.
You're there. If you think you're going to enter a sport like that and not get injured, think twice. So you have to go in there understanding that this is part of the equation. There's very few guys at the top that have not had some sort of a pretty bad injury, whether it's surgery based, whether it needs surgery is a different question, but I don't know. You look at what you got to do in that sport, and it's like the way I looked at it, and I'm sure the other guys had their own way of looked at it. It's like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. So it's if I go outside when it's pouring rain, and I get fucking butt hurt because I got wet, that's just, you know what you're doing. So you do your best not to get injured, of course, when it comes down to it. Like, here's a common injury. Happened to me multiple times. Happens to a lot of guys in a heavy deadlift. Yeah. Like you tear your lat out of your armpit. Your lat tears off. And I've had both of my lats tear off, not completely. One of my buddies actually had his whole lat completely disconnect and just ball up in his waistline.
Because you're pulling so much strength from your. So explain that, John. Is it because you're pulling so much? Explain that to me. Like you're pulling so much weight from your back, your lats are ripping. Everything.
Here's the deal. When you're doing something like this, body position is absolutely key. And if you don't stay in the right positions, you'll have, perfect example on that deadlift, when I was doing it, and like other guys, you get pulled a little bit forward, which then puts a lot of pressure on those lat insertions and your lower back. In my case, my lower back held up better than my lats. So when you're lifting really heavy and you're breaking records, especially like in Eddie's case, world records, you're doing your best to stay in proper form. But proper form in many cases is not part of a world record. You just have to struggle through getting out of position because it's new territory. And so you just got to realize this is funny enough. Eddie actually did that twice. He did it the first time, but he got to the top and he didn't hold it long enough. It ripped out of his hands. It's so heavy. So that was the first time he did it. And the second time he did it, he actually held it. And as he was going down, you got to find the footage. It's pretty crazy. As he's going down, he lets the bar down gentle because he wanted to make sure he got his world record. Goes out on the way down and literally tips over the bar, and he's sleeping, holding onto the bar for a second. And obviously his crew runs out and picks him up, and he wakes up. But you said he lost his eyesight at the top. Things were going dark, and that's 1,100 pounds. That's pretty heavy shit. Think of it like this. There's a few guys, Eddie being one of them. He pioneered a new path, much like Michael Jordan pioneered a new path. Yeah. And so when you're pioneering a new path, weird shit's going to happen. But the pioneer or the leader, that's why they're leaders, because they're willing to do the shit that most people won't do. And in a case like Eddie's, he was willing to do the shit, but he also had some genetic gifts, and to do what he did, there's got to be a lot of things in line. His posterior chain, he was known for his posterior chain, which is all the muscles for the deadlift.
Yes.
And he's a monster overhead presser. So he's arguably like one of the strongest men ever on the planet, because at one point he held I believe at one point he held the record for overhead press and for deadlift, which means the guy that can pick the most shit off the ground and the guy that can put the most shit over his head. That's
incredible.
So, and the cool thing about Eddie he is just a character, man. People love him because he's full of energy. He's full of really clever, you know. And so he's just one of those guys that, because a sport like strongman, of course, it's cultish and everybody wants the sport to grow. That's what we all want. And a guy like Eddie came along, and because he's from the UK, he was boom. They're big over there in terms of strongman. He was on McDonald's commercials and all sorts of shit. So it was really good for the growth of the sport, because he's that guy that could put the camera on and he's going to entertain people. And smaller sports need guys like that to bring more eyeballs to it. And Eddie did a phenomenal job of that.
Yeah. Hey, Jonny, we've talked before. You and Marty have talked in the past on the show, especially in the gym segment. In the gym coming up in a half an hour, actually, John and Marty, the only place you're going to get these two guys in the gym. We've talked about eccentric training before. John, what does eccentric training look like for somebody who's focusing on tendon health? Because we know with strength, you got muscles and you got tendons, and Eddie has stronger tendons than most. Are there particular exercises that somebody like yourself or Marty or an athlete would be doing that would focus as much on our tendon health more so than our muscle strength, Jonny? Like, what kind of exercises would you be doing for that?
Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because that's what it's the type of question most people would ask. And what you got to understand is this: bone density, tendon strength, and even growing world-class strength. There's exercises, but you're doing complete training for that, for your focus. What people are missing to develop the tendon strength, to develop the bone density, to develop the world-class strength, you need decades of doing this shit without missing. That's the difference. So don't think, oh, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work on my tendon strength. If you've been training hard for 25 years, guess what? You're already doing a good job of that, because the tendons are going to adapt. Now, keep in mind, if you're not lifting heavy, they have no reason to adapt. So if you're putting them in a load, so again, your body thinks, holy shit, man, he picked up some heavy stuff today. I better make those tendons stronger so they don't rip off the bone. Ligaments rip off the bone. I better make these tendons stronger so they don't separate from the muscle. And it's all about putting your body in a position where it's forced to adapt. Then everything, heavy load, bone density, tendon strength, ligament strength, muscle strength, the whole kit and caboodle. But it's putting your body under a load for a lengthy period of time. None of this shit happens in a few months or even a few years. Once you're a few years deep, you got a small down payment on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
It's time.
Marty, as you hear John talking, I know you're an athlete. You've been an athlete your whole life. You've been in the gym your whole life too. You train people. When you're hearing John talk about tendon strength and everything other than the muscles, when you start hearing some of the things that Eddie does and John, does it not just overwhelm your thought process? And do you think about some of these things when you're training customers, Jonny or Marty, even just yourself?
The philosophy is the same. It's a different sport. So whether I'm training the osteoporosis man or woman, whether I'm training the athlete who plays overseas basketball, it doesn't matter. The philosophy is still the same. It's consistency, and you get better over time. And John talked about the tendons, and it's a result of putting the work in. That's it. And whether you're going to the NFL, NBA, no matter what it is. And then I see, if you look down here on the comments, Kencho, he said, I started gym at 42. I'm 44 now. What are my realistic chances at going on the stage to compete naturally? And I'm going to let John answer that too. But it's the same thing. It's consistency. You can get consistent at 42 and be on the stage at 44 or 46 whenever you decide to. You know, the same philosophy John was just talking about, that applies to getting on stage for bodybuilding competition as well. My mom did a bodybuilding competition at 51 or 52. Her first and only one.
Your mom?
Yeah, my mom did.
That's
but I
awesome.
see, but I mean, at my gym, that's normal. People do it at 50, people do it at 60. It is what it is. So everything John talks about when it comes to fitness, bodybuilding, sports, or whether just being general population fitness, all of this applies. All that habit stacking, it all adds up together, and it's all about your consistency.
Yeah. Jonny?
Yeah, and whoever it was that asked the question, yeah, I can't tell you how many people at different ages I've brought to a stage or a platform to basically live out their dream. So
We got a break up there with Jonny, Marty, I think so.
I think so. Finally got a longer breakup with him.
We got a little bit of internet connection with Jonny. Johnny's joining us from California here this morning. Hey, listen, you're back. You're back. Good. Let's get you back up there.
Sorry. So anyway, for those of you that are wondering, can you do it? Absolutely, you can. It's just be totally honest. If you're 40, 50, 60, 70, you just need to find a person, a coach that can teach you the path to get there for your specific situation and your age. People in the 40s and 50s that try to do this stuff with the knowledge that's bouncing around in the gym, you're going to have some trouble.
Hey, you're hanging out with Keith, John, Marty, producer Christina Flynn. We're talking how to be strong like Eddie Hall. We're breaking down the science of Eddie Hall. We're talking about muscle strength, tendon strength, recovery, and so forth. And Johnny, are we confident with the internet connection to the lifestyle tip today? I think we are. Shall we do it? Let's get her done.